Well, how I ended up head of the McCormick Company has a lot to do with how I started. And it's kind of a silly story, but it's the truth. I was newly married, moved to Amarillo, needed a job, and had an interview with a man who was chairman at McCormick Company at the time. And it was on a Thursday afternoon. It was a strenuous interview, lasted about 3 hours. I left crying and thought, well, I'll never get a job there. On Saturday, right after that, he called me and he said, "Are you still interested in coming to work at McCormick?" And I said, "Well, yes, I am." And he said, "Well, our receptionist was caught robbing a convenience store. Could you come be the receptionist?" And I thought, well, it's not the job I want, but at least it's a job. So I went to work. But when I look back on that, the blessing is this, and this is what I tell students all the time, don't be afraid to take the lowest job in an organization, because if you have what it takes, you're going to make your way up. If they throw you into the deep end with the sharks on day one, your odds of success are not so good. If all you have to do is say, "Good morning, McCormick Advertising," anybody can do that, and then you can make your way on up the ladder. Of course, it takes some good luck, some hard work, some thinking, some out-of-the-box stuff. But anyway, 20 years after that, I ended up chairman of the company. Now there's a lot in between there, but I'll stop.
AMU.
Great, it's been a very interesting one. I grew up as the son of a professor. My dad was a professor at Cornell University, and I knew at a really young age that I liked that job. And so I decided that's what I wanted to do when I grew up. From singing happy birthday to pigs as they were born to enrolling at Cornell University for my undergraduate in animal science. I had a love for cattle. Decided I wanted to go on in nutrition and went to Texas A&M University for my graduate work and did a master's and a PhD in nutrition on beef cattle primarily. The first job out of college, I went to North Carolina State, and at North Carolina State I was in a teaching and research position, working with grazing animals and with a team of agronomists and USDA scientists along with teaching. I married a woman from Texas, from the panhandle of Texas, and a job came available at Texas Tech University to be the department head of animal science, and it was close to her home where she was raised. It had a good program that needed some help, and I decided to go to join Texas Tech University as department head of animal science. Became the Department of Animal and Food Science, spent 15 years there in that program. Then left for Colorado State University, where I was also the department head of animal science there. Thought it was my last job, to be honest. Enjoyed the teaching, enjoyed the research, enjoyed administering and so forth. But then something special was happening on the high plains of Texas and Canyon, and I came down to look at West Texas A&M University. It's a brand new facility that had just been raised with state dollars and donor dollars from the region. Saw the trajectory of what was going on there and thought, well, I'm going to use my skills in leadership and move it to the dean's level, and became the dean of the Paul Engler College of Agriculture and Natural Sciences. A great move for me to come here. Best job I've ever had. So my experience came along the way through growing up in upstate New York, being a damn Yankee, going to Texas A&M, going from there to zigzagging back to North Carolina State. Enjoyed that time there. Back to Texas, to Colorado, and here. So it's been kind of a back and forth adventure, but a great one.
It's a pretty funny story, actually. We came here to do wild game processing when we purchased this property, and we were big golfers, and getting into the archery end of it, we were bow hunters, and we made ourselves this beautiful archery range, which everybody was jealous of and heard of, and we made it like a golf course, and everybody wanted to come shoot it. So lo and behold, about a year later, we ended up with one of the greatest archery places in the country, which they used to call the Augusta of archery. So that's how we got in the archery business. The wild game processing was what fueled all of this. So.
Well, I've been around with Kubota for 10 years, and I started out as a field sales rep in the state of Arkansas. Got promoted and moved to the Atlanta, Georgia area, and I worked as a district sales manager and worked the whole eastern seaboard for Kubota, and then I was promoted to run the central United States for Kubota 3 years ago now. So that's my migration from within Kubota.
Well, I'd have to start with my journey at home. My dad was a farmer, and of course he worked us to death almost. But when I got into high school, my brothers had been in the NFA, the New Farmers of America, so I joined the FFA. It was the Future Farmers of America at that time, now the FFA organization. And I had two ag teachers that really instilled in me what I couldn't see in myself in terms of leadership, in terms of community outreach. And so it was through the FFA that gave me the opportunity to learn myself and be able to follow the leadership of my ag teachers. And Mr. Squire Jr., I would say, is responsible for me attending Prairie View A&M University and majoring in agriculture education. But I ended up being fascinated with plants and natural resource management, and I went to work for USDA Soil Conservation Service, which is now the Natural Resources Conservation Service. Interned with them for 3 summers, graduated, and went to work for them full time. And really enjoyed that, working with farmers and ranchers in production agriculture. And it gave me the opportunity to really understand the importance of agriculture in feeding the world, as it contributes significantly to the GDP. And so I stayed with them for about 12 years, and then I transitioned to go back to my alma mater, where I wanted to introduce other students an opportunity to attend college, particularly Prairie View A&M University, and major in agriculture. So that's what I do on a daily basis now. And it's still being involved with the Texas FFA. Even my own daughter went through the FFA in her high school journey. And so here we are today, talking about it, loving it, and living it.
Well, it's quite a journey. I think I had one of the best professors who had, quote, worked in the real world and really helped me understand what business was like. So I think, your educators really have a huge impact on your life, and I really credit him for, getting me to where I'm at.
Well, it's not a path that I would have chosen for myself. My son was tragically killed in an auto accident, and the organization is something that came from that. We didn't want Johnny's legacy to die with him. We wanted to carry it out through all the amazing things that he did in his life. So that's what we do with the organization is we just carry out the legacy that he lived.
Well, I'd always been interested in DU and heard about our local banquet there in Cleveland, and finally a friend of mine drugged me to one that he sat on a committee in South Texas in a little town called Alice. And I went to that event, come back home, didn't have a event in our town, so I started asking questions, grabbed a bunch of volunteers, and that was 17 years ago.
Very interesting route to be the president of Vernon College. This past summer, which will be 2020, I finished 40 years in the education business. I graduated college in 1980, full expectation of teaching ag for a few years, going back to my hometown, raising a few cows, and living life happily ever after. Had a great experience up at California's Boys Ranch. Had an opportunity to go teach ag and coach rodeo team down at Howard College in Big Spring in 1982. And 6 years goes by and you kind of mature, and I thought, well, why not have one of those doctor's degrees, because they pay you more. And so I went back to school. I had finished my master's, then finished my doctorate at Texas Tech. And then you get brainwashed into administration. That's what happens to good ag teachers. And across the state, you know it does. And so I had a good couple of mentors at Howard that gave me opportunities and kind of, quote, moved me up the ladder. And then it was time for me to move on. And after 15 years, I moved as a vice president to another small college in Arkansas. And from there, I went to be the president of a small college. And then in 2009, I was fortunate to be invited to come to Vernon College as the president. And so you look up and a fast 40 years has gone by.
Well, it's a rather long story, but the simple explanation is to always be open to opportunities. And this is probably my 4th career, and I just was looking for something new and jumped at an opportunity of something I had never done before. And it's my dream job that I never knew I wanted.
Well, it started with high school ag and FFA, and how much I enjoyed that organization and what it did for me as an individual. And through that, I decided that I might want to be an ag teacher. So as I started to think about that, at that particular time, there were very few female ag teachers. And so actually went into Sam Houston as an agribusiness major, and found out once I got there that there were a lot of other females who were actually teaching ag and majoring in ag education. And for me, at that point, I didn't want to totally change my major, but I was able to get my teaching certification with an extra semester. And that has led me basically to where I am now.
Sometimes you walk into a job, and other times you marry into a job. And I happened to marry into the family business and was offered a sales job when my wife and I were first married, and kind of worked my way up through the company as people retired or left the company, and eventually ended up taking over Sites Fundraising when my father-in-law retired 11 years ago.
Well, I actually had a career in the nonprofit world for about 12 years. And somebody approached me about coming to work for Cavender's, and knowing what I did about the company and the family, I decided to take the leap. There weren't many companies that I would have left the nonprofit world for, but Cavender's was one of them.
How did you end up where you're at?
I love this question. I got to BASF, hold on, start all over. All right. How I got to BASF. I took a little bit of a journey after graduating from Purdue and started out in seed quality and seed production in Northern Illinois, then ventured into ag sales in the ag retail sector as a sales agronomist in Western Kansas and Eastern Colorado. Then had the opportunity to join BASF as a sales rep covering Eastern Colorado. Then the opportunity came to me and to move to our marketing department and manage our post-corn herbicide business for 3.5 years, and then landed in this position 5 years ago as our regional sales manager, as I mentioned, in our turf and ornamental division, with the opportunity to coach, lead, and mentor 9 fantastic sales reps from Ohio to California.
Well, I spent 37 years in the hotel business. I started working in a hotel when I was a senior in high school, 1979. I actually started March the 10th, 1979. Spent 21 years at that particular company, from mowing the grass to working the front desk, housekeeping, maintenance. There wasn't a job at the property that I didn't do. Regional manager, area manager, divisional vice president, group vice president, senior vice president, executive vice president. And when I left that company after 21 years, I ran the operations of the whole organization. We sold that company in 1996. I joined La Quinta. We sold La Quinta in 2006 to Blackstone, and I stayed and worked as the president and CEO for Blackstone for the next 9 years. We took the company public in 2013, and I retired in 2015.
So I always knew that I wanted to be in marketing, and so when I was going to UTA, I started to take marketing classes. My degree is in communications, and so I remember reaching out to our marketing person here in Dallas and asking her about what my path will look like getting into marketing here in Dallas, and her response was, hey, it's really hard to get in. If you want to grow in T-Mobile, you have to go to Seattle. And so I knew that that's the path that I wanted to take, so I continued to reach out and I asked her to be my mentor. And that led to hard work and doing my own marketing at my store, moving up with the company, which ended up me having the job that I have now.
Sales for Workday. You have to kind of understand a little bit about Workday. Workday is a modern cloud ERP system that's really bringing to the forefront new cloud technology in the HR, HCM, financial, and planning space. My actual day-to-day job is to talk to companies all across the nation about adopting our platform and our software in their business. How I got there, that's always a story, right? So it goes back to being a Texas State FFA officer and kind of coming up through FFA and really kind of seeing that world from an agricultural lens, but then also being a part of LDEs and CDEs and those sorts of things that made me sort of think through what my career should be. And so I was always this kid that was a sophomore, junior, senior in high school that grew up in an ag background, that grew up in a farm and ranch, but just wasn't necessarily sure that that's exactly what I wanted to do for a living. And so it was through somewhere in those particular formative years that I said, I'm going to go to Texas A&M, I'm going to get a business degree, and we're going to go from there. And so a lot of my thought was, hey, I'm probably going to end up in the ag field. Right out of college, right at the end of college, I met a really great guy that was a really great mentor of mine. And he challenged me to just kind of think a little differently. And candidly, the story goes that I applied for 2 jobs. One was an ag job and one was not. And the one that not was in California, so I took that one.
Yes, sir. My path to college may have looked a little bit differently than most ag students. I grew up in the middle of the 4th largest city in the nation, Houston, Texas. And when I say in the middle of Houston, I mean like right 15 minutes away from downtown in the middle of Houston. So all through high school, I was involved with FFA, but not being from a production ag background, I didn't really know what the industry looked like hands-on. I loved all things FFA. I did everything I could to get involved and obviously be in all the officer positions and meet all the people I could, but it wasn't until I got to WT that I really found my true passion for agriculture. We can all say the creed, I believe in the future of agriculture, but until you see it hands-on and live in it, you really just don't understand. And since I've gotten to WT, I've found my passion for the industry and more importantly for the people within it. I understand that I'm lacking a little bit not growing up in an ag background, but I'm just getting in everything that I can at WT and really hoping to utilize what I learned here to benefit the industry in the future. I may not have grown up like most ag students, but I'm definitely here for the long haul and I'm here to make a difference in the industry. Thinking past college, I want to make a positive difference in agriculture, but also for WT. I think a lot of people would knock a smaller school and the things that they can accomplish, and I want to just make an impact and have people say that's what WT Ag is producing and be a positive product of their toil.